Hello and welcome to The Stack. This week we hear from iconic sound designer Michel Gaubert about his memoir, Remixed, plus Gene Heimann from Taschen, a newsletter about saunas, and the couple behind Lucian Books and Wine in Atlanta. Enjoy the show. From Midori House in London, this is The Stack, 30 minutes of print industry analysis, and I am Fernando Augusto Pacheco. This week, The Stack has a bookish flavor, and we start the show on a very good note. I had the pleasure to speak with sound designer Michel Gaubert. Basically, he's responsible to the soundtrack of the best fashion shows out there. I always keep my Shazam in hand while watching the music he makes for the Chanel shows, for example. He's a true fashion and music legend. And now he's got a new memoir out called Remixed, published by Fayard, and here is my conversation with Michel.
Well, it's true. I mean, the book is both personal, but I mean, it's very hard to dissociate my life, from my work because it's part of me, what I mean? So, I mean, music has been a part of me since I was very young, since I was a kid. So it's very hard and I use it to work. So, it's all integrated. The book, I mean, in the beginning, I wasn't sure I wanted to do a book. I mean, I was approached by the publishing company, and I was thinking about it, and because I didn't know which angle I would use to write the book. It's true that a lot of people, they don't, they think, oh my God, Michel Gaubert does, music for runway shows or soundtracks or whatever, and they don't know why it goes that way. You think, oh my God, it's just like playing music, but it's not. So I wanted to explain to people, a bit who I am, where all my inspiration came from, how I start to like music, learn music, about music. So I just wanted to share that with people, in general, because they're curious, and I hope they are.
We're here in London talking to you. You're in Paris right now, but London was quite you had quite an early experience here, right? Music-wise.
Oh, yes. Very much. London was my first trips outside of France, and also by myself. We had the parents on top of me. It's not, I didn't like my parents or anything like that, but it was more like I was more left to myself. So, it was easier for me to get lost in music and, and the pop world. So London was very important, very, very important to me. In the beginning, at least it was, yes, because it opened doors for me and it showed me that music was different, and perception of things were different. Also, it's not just music, it's like that was given another option how to look at the world,
I have a question for you. I know you had a deep connection with Karl Lagerfeld. You met him even before Chanel and everything. And so tell us, was it your kind of start point in the fashion world after when you meet Karl? Was that one of the kind of defining moves to you?
Yes. I was working on shows before Karl, but they were they were smaller, independent, shows and I was doing that as a side gig because I was working in the record stores. So, and the day that, they came to the store and asked me if I wanted to do music for them, I said, okay, well, sure. I said yes, because I'm always ready for a new project. And then I was like, okay, now I have to do it, It was one step above of everything I was doing, It was like to me, oh my God, I got to get my stuff together, because it has to be impeccable.
Did you and Karl had a similar kind of music taste? Did you kind of get on together because you get what I'm trying to show with my music here?
Yeah, it's not, we had a similar, I understood. The thing is, even with most people I work with, I understand their music taste. I understand where they're coming from. From Karl, it was like such a strong personality. Like the music he liked was part of him, I think we got along because we had a good connection, and he was he understood where I was coming from. I was bringing him things he might not have known, that was a bit outside of his radar. I was more into music than he was. It was my job. So he needed me, and from him, I discovered music I didn't really know. He liked a lot of Italian music that I didn't know really well. He liked classical music. He turned me on to a lot of classical music, and also a way of looking at things. He looked at things differently than me, and so did I. But together, were complementary, and that was very interesting because he was, I guess, interested enough in discovering what I had to say, and I was also very interested in what I had to say. It was just not like me for me and him for him. It was like really sharing, and I would say that most people I work with, that's when it's the best, because it's when you share ideas, when you share things. That's why I like to call it a collaboration. It's like an encounter of culture, and that's when to me, that's when it's the most interesting.
Because I presume, of course, you choose the music and the vibe after you've seen the clothes, right? So it has to be kind of very Michel Gaubert, the music, but also kind of associated with the clothes and what the collection is about, right?
Okay, the collection is one thing. Of course, that's important because the fashion show is all about showing the collection. But nowadays, I think it's changed a little bit. A show is more about a mood, like an idea you want to convey, so you bring out the clothes, but the clothes are part of a bigger realm, like the clothes are also part of where we stand in time, it's the expression of fashion is also a reflection of what's going on around us, so it's and there's lots of things happening at the moment in all aspects. And the music reflects that as well, and sometimes the music is like not easy, but sometimes it can be easier than just seeing a collection by itself because people relate to music very easily. You understand what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's not very easily, but they react to a collection more, to music in a closer way because it's more part of their daily life. I don't know anybody who doesn't hear music. I don't know if they listen to music, but I don't know anybody who doesn't hear music like most of the day because like wherever you go, there's music, It's not like it was even 20 years ago, there's music like in the bar, in the cafe, in the subway, in the taxis, on the street, it's part of your daily life.
One thing I like about your work is there's a fun element to it. It always surprises. So you can be playing like a classical music piece, but then you move on swiftly to Felix, Don't You Want Me, And that's the magic. And I think it kind of keeps people on their toes as well. Would you say that you're a bit like that? Kind of, you mix kind of those genres, but in such a nice way.
Yeah, I like to, I can do that. I like to play opposites attract, basically, but I like to find a link between things, that's not really, well, it sounds obvious when you hear it, but it's obvious to me, but like maybe people wouldn't think about it. But I don't always do that, so it's not always, I like to be a bit more expect the unexpected, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I like it better when you see and you hear something like you expect something, but what you're being served is something different, so that way it's more exciting.
When you're picking the music, I was wondering, perhaps it's more organic than I'm imagining, but do you need to have, okay, it's a fashion show, it needs to have certain beats per minute, or do you go more with your heart in a way, more than just this kind of very technical part?
No, I go more in my heart, basically. It's not even the heart. It's more like feelings. I would
Yes.
say I go more with feelings. I think the beats per minute, like it could be like girls could even walk in silence if we wanted to. It wouldn't be weird. So I don't think the beats per minute doesn't help the girls walk. It helps more it helps more the audience, basically, because the faster the music is, people think there's energy. And when you look at the girl walking, she's going to walk the same way as she would be walking on the slower music. But the music gives it more. And it's like in a film, basically, like you take the same scene of a movie and you play a slower BPM track and you play a fast track, then the scene completely changes. So with a fashion show, it's exactly the same.
I feel that your role is becoming more important in this age of kind of algorithms, because I do get very tired of Spotify, suggesting the same artist to me. Do you feel the role of a curator is becoming a luxury in these days where people are relying sometimes on those kind of algorithms on social media. I'm not necessarily just saying bad things about that, but there's something missing in a way.
Yeah, plus, I mean, the thing about algorithms is like everyone thinks they can do it by themselves. Oh my God, I'm like cool, I'm being helped. I mean, I use also algorithms from Spotify. Sometimes I'm very surprised, but it runs out of steam after 5 minutes because then they keep refreshing and offering you the same stuff. You know what I mean? So it's not. So of course I need to be there because the human touch. I mean, whether it's irreplaceable. So far I haven't met any algorithm that was blowing my mind. I'm surprised and I think it helps, but you still need the human brain, because the personality or whatever you want to call it.
I was wondering, how do you listen to your music? Because funnily enough, at home, I still listen to a lot of CDs. I kind of like CDs. But I wonder, are you kind of a vinyl type of guy, or do you go actually on the streaming services? How is your listening habits these days?
I listen to files 95% of the times. I listen to files because it's not only streaming services. I mean, I use my computer and I use music, which is formerly iTunes. I have another software, and because I get sent stuff all the time. So sometimes I receive files, sometimes I receive links to things. So it's basically on my computer. I listen to music on my computer. And I listen to music in different way. I mean, there's music when I want to discover things, and there's music I like to listen to for myself. It's very different.
I mean, in your book, of course, there's amazing stories about your career, as I said at the beginning, with Carl. I mean, are you, when you look at all of that, are you still kind of happy, optimistic with the fashion industry? I mean, what's your relationship actually with the industry? Because, of course, you still soundtrack many shows for very important brands.
Of course, because the basic principle of fashion is describing who you are and describing how you place yourself in society, like in the current mood of the world, because I say that again, like fashion is a reflection of the world that surrounds us, And it's the same as music anyway, it's like music is even more instant than fashion. So of course it's just interesting because I'm interested in what's coming out of what we, of the world, of what we do, of what we live, of what we go through. So I think it's very important medium.
I don't know how much you can say, but of course the men's fashion weeks are coming out very soon. Are you doing any shows that I should keep an eye on so I can know what are the tracks that you're going to be using?
I'm going to be working on Willy Chavaria, Sakai, and Junjay. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was listening. I think your Willy Chavaria's playlist I saw on your Mixcloud. It was pretty cool. I think the Tarantula, that was really nice, actually.
Thank you. Well, I mean, there was part live and part recorded music.
Michel Gaubert there, and Remixed, published by Fayad, is out now. And now we head to Atlanta to talk about Lucian, a hybrid wine-centric restaurant plus a bookstore selling art and design and cookbooks. Here on the stack, we're all for mixing a bit of good food and drink with good print. The co-owners of Lucian are husband and wife, Katie Barringer and Jordan Smout, who on a trip to London stopped by a Midori house to tell me a bit more about Lucian and their future projects. Katie Barringer and Jordan Smout from Lucian in Atlanta. Very exciting to have you guys over. Thank you so much for coming here.
Thank you.
Nice to be here.
Great to be here. I wonder, Katie, and then I want to hear a few words from Jordan as well. Please, would you like to introduce Lucian to us? Because I know it's a beautiful restaurant full of amazing wine, but also it caught my eye that you also sell cookbooks, and I think that's such a wonderful idea.
Sure. So, Lucian, we are a wine-centric restaurant and specialty bookstore. And the specialty bookstore aspect, it's all nonfiction books and a few magazines, food, wine, and then mostly art and design and visual culture.
That's amazing. And tell us a bit more, Jordan, about why have you decided to add, the book side to the restaurant as well?
Well, books are very important to both of us. It's Katie had a previous bookstore in Atlanta. It's actually great to be talking to you in London, because when the idea for Lucian really came together, it was when we were together visiting London in 2018. And we had been thinking of, are we going to do a bookstore? Are we going to do a restaurant that's very wine-centric? And on a trip to London, we realized that we should put the two together. And that's how the whole thing really started to take shape.
When I had my previous bookstore cover, which also was all nonfiction, Jordan and I used to collaborate through wine on a lot of events, and we realized that the two worlds just worked very well together, and we shouldn't be limiting by doing one or the other. And we have found that the two do work very well together.
So I want to know a bit more about you, Katie. So you had a bookstore before, so clearly you wanted to bring some of that aspect of your life to the restaurant as well.
Absolutely. So my background is mixed between kind of an arts background and then working in wine. Part of that was just a lack of arts opportunities in Atlanta at the moment. And I found that a way to bring those two interests together, a perfect way, was through a bookstore, because you can really curate the subject matter. And I think the culinary and the creative sides just are very closely aligned. So the bookstore, traditional book retail, certainly in Atlanta, presents many challenges. And we found that by combining it with a restaurant, certainly a wine-centric restaurant, was a way for people to feel comfortable and engage in books without having to step inside something that felt more intimidating or dated.
And you say wine-centric restaurant as well. I was looking, you have over 450 kind of different kind of types of wine as well. So tell us a bit more your experience of wine and
Well, for Lucian, we wanted to. Lucian's a small restaurant. It's 40 seats, which was very intentional. A lot of our favorite restaurants in London, in New York, small restaurants with expansive wine programs are the norm. Not so much in Atlanta. Atlanta tends to have large restaurants, hundreds of seats. So that was a place where we said, okay, let's be different. Let's do an expansive program, but keeping it really intimate in terms of the space. The books help with that. And even the format of the bottles, it's a global program, but the format of the wine list itself, we opened in June of 2021. COVID was still very much on front of everyone's minds, and a lot of wine lists, dinner menus had gone to QR codes or tablets and things of this nature. And we really wanted to bring print back to the menu. So we print the wine list every 2 months. It's about 44 pages. It's small enough that every guest gets a copy in their hands. Most restaurants, as I'm sure you know, if you're dining, they tend to just hand the wine list to the oldest man at the table. Mm-hmm. We wanted to get away from that and make sure that everyone got a copy so that it's more conversational. So the exact size escapes me, but it's
a little larger than a paperback book.
Yeah.
It's about the size of Monocle.
I love that already. And let's be honest, like a QR code for a wine list is so complicated because, like, I understand if it's a small menu, I don't like QR codes anyway, but it's just makes sense, right, to have it in print.
Absolutely. I mean, if we're the largest wall in the restaurant is full of books. The wine list is a book that you hold in your hand. Food is sensory. I mean, I think part of the reason that the restaurant and the retail side overlap so nicely is that they're dual sensory experiences. So to have a QR code just didn't make any sense. So we had to make a decision of, are we being socially responsible, but also staying true to who we were.
I love that. And I want to hear a little bit about the food as well. I was looking at your Instagram page. A great pappardelle there, some fries with spring mayo, which...
Yeah, spring onion.
Spring onions.
Changes. The previous one was tarragon. Modern European is a way I could easily just encapsulate the menu. There's a lot of French influences, There's Italian influences. We make fresh pasta, a little bit of Mediterranean from time to time. But usually there's about 15 to 18 items on the menu total. And it just rotates with produce that's available at the time. And we keep it very simple.
Part of our goal was to create a place that did not feel distinctly Southern in Atlanta. We're both from the South. It's a place that we love very much and feel very proud of. But I think sometimes there's just too much of a focus on regionality. And we wanted everything that we did, whether it was, the titles on the shelves, the wine list, as well as the food, to just represent something a little broader than just our immediate region. And Atlanta is such an international city, and we felt that there was a little bit of a missing opportunity.
It's an incredibly well-connected city as well, right? It's one of the busiest airports in the world, no?
I think it's still, for the past
it's number one or number two, yeah.
Yeah, number one or number two, I think, for the past 20 years. So there's a lot coming, and, with the World Cup and with a lot of just international companies that have chosen to headquarter there. Certainly, I think there's been a little bit of an exodus from New York. A lot of people have come, and LA, to Atlanta. So we wanted a place where we could create an atmosphere and a menu with book titles that appealed to people that were living in other international cities, and we wanted to make sure that they felt comfortable somewhere.
Yeah, we've had a lot of guests say to us since we opened, I just moved here from New York. I just moved here from LA. I just moved here from San Francisco or Seattle. This makes sense to us. The space itself, the book, the presence of the books, a deep wine list, good food, just the physical space. It's just like this makes sense to us, and that makes us feel very good.
And even we're working on a second restaurant called Sargent, restaurant and retail called Sargent. And it's interesting because the owners and developers where we're going are, I think, friends with the Monocle team, and I think they recorded a radio session in the space right next to us.
Amazing.
But I think they're also recognizing just this opportunity and just looking at connections that run past the state.
And for the new opening next year, will print be a strong part of the whole enterprise as well?
Even larger, yes. Mm-hmm. The entire operation is larger. It's about 3 times the size of Lucian. I know. It's a little... I swallow deeply.
It's Atlanta, okay? So
yeah.
That's okay.
Exactly. The bookstore will have a much larger footprint, and I'm excited because I used to carry a ton of magazines and journals at my previous bookstore, and I've been a little limited at Lucian just because of merchandising space. Because, stocking magazines, it just requires a different physical merchandising plan. But at Sargent, we will bring back quite a few. I think at one point at the cover, I had around 70 titles, and we're excited.
And it's such a booming sector, right, Jordan? When you look at the, magazines and cookbooks, it's really successful. Like, even I host the Stack every week, our show about magazines. There's so many food magazines out there. It's incredible because people want to read. They want to know more, not just recipes, but the story behind the makers and so much more, right?
When people who knew Katie's previous bookstore, when she tells them that there's going to be a magazine selection again at Sargent, they immediately are so excited about it. So
it's just one of those odd things about Atlanta. For being as central and as international as we are, there are certain kind of gaps in what I think we can offer culturally. And I feel like magazines are just something that makes sense in an international city. So
I don't want to put you on the spot, but already putting you on the spot, do you have any favorite food magazines you like to mention, or perhaps stock at Sargent as well?
Oh, gosh. Well, of course, Noble Rot. I mean, Noble Rot we've been carrying since, cover since 2015, and that it's been so exciting just to see how much that audience has grown, and obviously they understand the hybrid concept very well with what they do here. We went to a great little magazine shop a couple of days ago in Covent Garden, and was a kid in a candy store. And there were just so many niche ones. There was, a bakery, a baking. Of course, I'm drawing a blank right now on the spot, but I love ones that tell thematic themes, like whether it's city-based or just, again, telling the stories behind them.
Because with food, you can also talk about travel. You can talk. It opens up to other topics. Every time I discuss this with an editor of one of those publications, they mention that as well. It's quite a lot of. Do you have a favorite, Jordan, or if not, even a book perhaps that you're selling right now?
One of my favorite books that we've had at Lucian in recent years was called Friuli, which was about 1/3. The first third of the book was about wines and winemakers from the region, and then the second part of the book was wonderful recipes from different areas of the region. And I just love that balance. It really spoke to me, and I would recommend the book constantly to folks that came in, just because there's that synergy again. It's a book, there's wine, it's food, everything comes together, I feel like, in that book. So I can't recommend that one highly enough.
I also think when we find titles, like it used to be, there was a wine magazine, there was a bread magazine, there was a travel magazine, but I feel even places like Cultured Magazine, they're folding food into it. And for me, that I think is the most exciting, where things don't have to be so thematic or so intentional. It's just telling like one general story. And I feel that more and more kind of art and design magazines are adding a food and wine element to it, because I think in real life it's such an easy format. So those are the ones I feel like that always check all the boxes.
Thank you, Katie and Jordan. And if you are in Atlanta, make sure to pay a visit to Lucian. More info on lucianbooksandwine.com. And now, I did tell you it was going to be a bit of a bookish show. I speak with Jean Heimann, executive editor for Taschen, and also an avid print collector, authoring numerous books about architecture, pop culture, and the history of Los Angeles and Hollywood. To discuss a bit more about Taschen and his illustrious career, here is Jean with more. Jean Heimann, executive editor of Taschen America, a pleasure talking to you, big fan of your books here. Jean, my first question, a pretty basic one. You have quite a long history with Taschen, right?
Yeah, I started with Taschen about 25 years ago and have worked continuously with Benedict. Prior to that, I had a career that was illustration and graphic design. But as side projects, I was always publishing books, kind of specifically on Los Angeles and Hollywood related. But that's what caught Benedict's attention, because at the point that we met, in 2000, he was looking for someone to do a book on Los Angeles. And so those books attracted him. And so he gave me a cold call one day at my studio. And I thought it was a joke. One of my friends playing a joke, saying they were Benedict Taschen. And he said, "Can I come to your studio?" And I said, "Sure." And there he was 20 minutes later.
And there's something quite Taschen about Los Angeles as well. I think it's such a visual city, as well. So I think that's kind of the perfect fit in a way.
Well, Benedict is a huge fan of Los Angeles. And when he first visited LA in the 80s, he was pretty smitten with the city. And he just grew to really, love the city. And he's invested. He's got a couple houses that are kind of landmark houses in Los Angeles. And he resides here most of the year. So he's a big fan of LA. And, David Hockney fit right into that whole look of LA. And so, yeah, LA and Taschen are very compatible.
I know you're based in LA, but are you from LA originally?
I was born here. My mother was born here.
Wow.
Wife and I went to school together since first grade. My daughter was born here, and my granddaughter was born here. So yes, we have roots deep in Los Angeles.
That's so rare, because cities like Los Angeles, London, New York, it's very rare to actually have someone that is actually from the city itself.
Yeah, and this is LA is a very transient population, so it's we're kind of on the small percentage of people who are born and raised here.
Well, we'll talk more about your work at Taschen, but I'm very curious because you have an incredible archive of, of paper, of many things. I want actually to talk to you about what actually do you collect print-wise, because it's quite a collection, right?
Yeah, there's, I counted it. There's 36 categories that I collect.
Wow.
Much of it is Southern California, LA centric, but I have 10,000 menus that I've collected and continue. I just picked up one on the other day at the flea market, so that continues to expand that particular collection. But yeah, it's brochures, it's you name it, magazines, brochures, photographs. We're currently working on a project on the history of nightclubs in Los Angeles and Hollywood. And so I know that I have the most extensive collection of that material in the world. And that comprises of everything from swizzle sticks to toothpicks to napkins to photographs to menus, etc. So yeah, you can kind of see behind me there's a rather extensive. This is just maybe a tenth of what you're seeing, but I have 2 storage units here in LA, one in Santa Barbara, and they're all jam-packed with material. So yeah, the collection is extremely extensive, deep in a lot of areas, but it covers a lot of territory. And of course, when I do a book project, I kind of expand, that particular subject matter. And so then it becomes kind of complete. You mentioned earlier the surfing books. I have a nice collection of surfing material that I've collected over the years. And a lot of it I collected when I was, in the early 60s, when I was a teenager. And I kept everything. So I kept all my magazines, all my surfer magazines, and that all still is, part of the collection.
I'm obsessed with surfing imagery, and I love your book about surfing for Taschen as well. It's something special, and I tell people I am not a surfer and I don't know how to surf, but there's something quite addictive about it. I guess you have a similar experience as well, because you also love those type of imageries. Are you a surfer, by the way?
I'm not a surfer. I grew up by the beach, okay. Certainly within a mile or so of the beach. And growing up as a teenager in the early 60s, of course, it was, rampant with surf culture. The Beach Boys were basically rivals, high school rivals, not too far from the high school that I went to. They played at local dances. And so I was totally embedded in the culture, but the big problem I had was a surfboard was too big to take it on my bicycle, and so I couldn't really get to the beach unless someone's parent took us to the beach. So that hampered my ability to get in the water on a surfboard. I body surfed a lot, but never on a board. But nonetheless, that culture was kind of the culture of my youth, and I reveled in it. It was all the visuals and the photographs and so on, and that what prompted the books to come into fruition, because Benedict also saw surfing culture as being kind of an international theme that people responded to, whether you're a surfer or not. So actually, that particular project worked in my behalf, because there were several books that are out on surfing, but usually they were from the perspective of a surfer. So they focused on waves more than they did on the cultural aspects. And my whole idea was, let's look at the bathing suits, let's look at the posters, let's look at the, the photographs, let's look at, the whole range of what surfing, influenced in popular culture. And then that became the context for the large book on surfing.
And we have a new book of yours that is being released, All American Ads of the 2000s. And of course, it's a great series. I told you I do own the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. You know what I find so fascinating about those books? Because reading it, you kind of understand, in this case, the U.S. in the decade. Because I think ads, they really represent society at the time, right?
Yes, and that was actually the first book that I did for Taschen was the All American Ad series, and Benedict had come to my studio, but a lot of the stuff was at my storage units and at home. So he came over and started looking around. And so he suggested, has anybody ever done a book on American advertisements? And I said, well, not anything comprehensive. There's a couple books on auto ads, but nothing substantial. And he said, let's do one on by decade, American ads by decade. He said, what do you want to start with? And I said, well, I have a lot of material on the 40s and 50s. He said, good, let's start with the 50s. And he said, look, he said, in Europe, he said, we don't have the culture that American culture had, especially in Germany. He said in post-war Germany, there wasn't, the money, and or they were just trying to, get themselves back on, stability after the war. He said, so we looked, and Europeans looked towards America because it was so strong and powerful with hot rods and rock and roll and hot dogs and hamburgers. And it dominated, people's what people were looking for. He said, so he said, we didn't have those ads in Germany. There wasn't that, cumulative amount of advertisements for appliances and cars and so on. He said, but in America, it was a massive thing. He said, so he said, I think people will really be fascinated with seeing, all of these ads and seeing what American popular culture was all about through advertisements. So that was the premise of it. And then he just said, we're going to do the whole century. So, one decade by one decade, we just kept, doing it until we ended up with the 2000s. And I believe that's going to be it.
Well, but
only because media has changed so much, and people don't advertise in print that much anymore. And they still do, but it's diminished so much that we don't see, another volume coming out. So we're kind of tapping it at 2010.
And I don't want to be negative here, but sometimes, Jin, when I'm here in the London tube and the ground and I see the posters, they're not very inspiring, because even, let's say, in 2000, there was a little bit of more color, there were a little bit of more money actually being spent on advertising. But maybe I'm too negative. I don't know. What's your take on that?
Well, I think you're probably correct, because the advertising revenue has drifted to online. So the advertising budgets aren't really focusing on print. So consequently, your creative stuff is really going to go online as opposed to being in print. So yeah, there's going to be, kind of a drop in that. I mean, I still keep, there's magazine, stands in LA, not a lot, but there's still about a dozen or so. And so I hit them every once in a while, once a month. I just go and stand and start flipping through magazines to see what's in there. But they become so thin. And again, like you said, the ideas that are being expressed aren't the best. It used to be that this is where the focus was, and it isn't. So therefore, the creative, energy is going somewhere else. And so it's diminishing, little by little, which I think I find that to be a difficult proposition, because you don't know what's going to happen with, these ads that are online, because if there's, a power surge, or there's, some way that, they disappear, that's gone, but something that's tangible that you can hold on to, at least there's some record of it. So I'm a little hesitant to throw my full weight behind all, digital advertising and stuff. I still hold on to this print idea.
I agree, and I'm sure there's still people doing, great ads on print. But Jen, what about the 2000s in your latest book? Were there any kind of trends or specific ads, maybe comparing to the previous decade, in the 90s, for example?
Well, the digital world takes over. I mean, that's our biggest chapter in the 2000s. And certainly it was apparent, starting in, 1984 with, the Mac coming into being. And, it slowly accelerated over those couple decades and the products that were associated with it. But, by the 2000s, it's just jammed. Everybody's just getting, throwing iPhones and all kinds of different programs. And it's all is kind of focused on that. So that was the big chapter and the big change for the 2000s. I think from another point of view, there was the underwear ads. I always, kind of look as a bellwether of, what's happening, because for men's underwear, when Calvin Klein started, throwing, 6-story ads in New York with a guy in his underwear, that changed a whole section of advertising where you never ever saw that. No one ever talked about or focused on men's underwear, and all of a sudden this became a thing. And then it became very, erotic and homoerotic, and it just, and then it probably in the late 80s through the 90s, and then by the 2000s it started tapering off a little bit. And of course, consequently with the Me Too movement, it's kind of somewhat evaporated, although, from a female perspective, there still is a lot of exploitive stuff going on with the ads. But if you look at, some of the Tom Ford ads in the early 2000s, they're pretty out there, They're very, sexualized. And so that was an interesting, to kind of follow that for several decades and see how that, filled out. Now, I haven't found much of anything in that kind of genre. It just kind of has drifted away. So it seemed to be kind of a period thing that just, rose for a couple of decades. And then just by the late 2010s or so, it just started to fade out a little bit.
The Tom Ford one is a great example, actually, because, I personally like it. I the way it kind of pushes some boundaries, but it couldn't happen in 2025 in a way.
Couldn't. You go back and look at those ads now, and from the 80s and the 90s, and you just think, there's no way you could ever do this again. There's no ways these ads would ever pass anybody. Dolce and Gabbana, has done some stuff that was, kind of, out there too, but I just think that, these days, the environment has changed so much in terms of what, people are willing to accept, that it's, there's a lot of censorship going on, self-censorship and so on. So it's turned a corner. But yeah, there was some pretty out there stuff.
That's fantastic. Gene Heimann, a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Gene. One of his most recent books, All American Ads of the 2000s, is out now, published by Taschen. And for more information about him, go to geneheimann.com. And finally on the stack, the Sauna Summit took place in London a few weeks ago, an event hosted in London. And now finally on the stack, the Sauna Summit took place in London a few weeks ago, an event hosted by the British Sauna Society, established in 2014 by a group of Brits and Finnish expats, attracting keynote speakers and delegates from all over the world of sauna. Attending from Minnesota, United States, was Glenn Auerbach, the founder of Sauna Times, established in 2008 as a global newsletter, journal website and podcast. He joined Monocle Stoneweb to share more about the publication.
Well, I'm here at the British Sauna Summit. This is the second annual, and I was blown away last year with the spirit of the people in this ecosystem, and so I'm very, very happy to be back for year two.
And please explain Sauna Times to our listeners.
Yeah, Sauna Times. Well, it's I guess the backbone of it is the website, saunatimes.com. I founded that in 2008. 900, maybe 1,000 articles by now. I'm the primary contributor to the website, although I welcome a lot of contributing writers' articles. I think I've really tuned this judo move of listening to other people, and when there's other people that have really compelling observations or insights about this space, I welcome them. I really it's a welcoming website for others.
And were you the pioneer of that space?
Of Sauna Times, absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of my baby.
And do you work alone?
Yeah, I'm just a one-man band.
And how is that, and why do you work in that way?
Well, I don't know. I think I was traumatized in the food service industry as seeing managers getting phone calls at 4 a.m. because their opening shift server is calling in sick and stuff like that. I've never been a people manager in my professional career in the food industry. I worked for Nestle for 20 years and had no direct reports, but I had a very large responsibility. But I was responsible mainly to myself. And I think I've just kind of tuned a life of that. I've never managed people, just 2 sons and my wife.
And how is it being in a conference again?
Well, this is a Hilton hotel. I worked for Nestle for 20 years, and so we had many conferences and food shows in this type of environment. So I'm very familiar with this, but it's so great to be here with sauna and as my passion in this space. I much prefer being in nature. Sauna in nature is integral for me, and so this is great that the facility is what it is, but it would be really fun to be out and doing this in nature.
When you set up the Sauna Times almost 20 years ago, were you the only person doing what you were doing?
I think so. I have a lot of respect for the Finnish style of sauna, and it happened very organically when I was living here in London in the 80s. As a student, I spent a summer up in the Nordic region between Sweden and Finland rebuilding a house on an island in the archipelago, and it was a very formidable experience for me to. We would knock off work and head off to the guy's other uncle's island in a boat, and we'd fire up the wood-burning sauna. And we really, from the first time I threw water on the rocks and we jumped in the Baltic, I was completely changed. I was very hooked by that, and so I brought that experience to America. And I moved to Minnesota because of the topography, the nature, the lakes, the water, the islands, and bought an island. I bought an island in northern Minnesota, and the first thing I did is built a sauna. And so this was not unique to that region. A lot of Finns emigrated to northern Minnesota in the late 1800s and brought sauna with them. So I sought out a place in North America where I could live legally, because I got kicked out of Europe because I was no work permits and stuff. So I returned to America and brought sauna with me and found a place where sauna is celebrated.
And now you celebrate it and share it with the world. Where is your audience from? Where are your listeners, your readers? Where do they come to you from? Yeah,
I'll give it to you like this. I wrote a book on how to build a sauna, and it was in ebook format. I just brought it out to print edition, and it's 4th edition. It's now in print. I'm very, very pleased to bring that to people. But when people were coming to me through Sauna Times to purchase the ebook, I could see where people were from, and it was predominantly Minnesota, Wisconsin, New England, Canada, that belt, that longitudinal area, which makes sense, where you have 4 seasons and, you're doing snow angels in winter. And so sauna grew in that geography quite steadily, over some time. But then when COVID hit, it really blew up. I mean, this thing, I was getting orders in readership, Alabama, Texas, Florida, California, big sauna mecca growth. And I didn't know why that was coming from. I mean, my sister lives down in Florida. I mean, it is literally a sauna 6 months of the year outside. And so, anyway, this contrast therapy business and people coming to sauna from the cold exposure has really kind of blown up. And that's my North America audience. I wouldn't say exclusively, because people from New Zealand, Australia, Britain here, there's a little bit of a following of Sauna Times here in this country. So I'm very, pleased that other people have used my resource as a vehicle for them to discover and realize their own sauna dreams.
Thank you very much, Glenn. For more information, go to saunatimes.com. And that's it for this week's show. My thanks to our editor, Elliot Greenfield. If you have any comments or queries, feel free to write to me, Fernando, at fp@monocle.com. And remember, we're back next Saturday at 10 a.m. London time. Meanwhile, you can always listen again at monocle.com and subscribe on Apple Podcast and Spotify. You've been listening to The Stack. I'm Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.